So like many other people who probably watch my channel, I'm a big fan of video essays. It doesn't matter if I've heard about the topic or not. If it's on my recommended and it looks interesting, yeah, I'll watch it. What do you mean Conclave and Lemonade Mouth are the same movie? 2 hours on the origins of a sound effect in Roblox? Sign me up. I love hearing people's thoughts on other topics. I enjoy listening to some well-researched deep dives, and overall, I'm not particularly picky when it comes to watching analysis of media I haven't really engaged with myself. If someone is passionate about a topic and it shows, I tend to generally enjoy their content too. A few months ago, while I was doing my usual looking up video essays and sorting by this month so I'd get newer content, I got recommended this video by the YouTube channel The Second Story, The Absolute Degeneracy of Modern Writing. It does everything right for the algorithm. It has a catchy title. Degeneracy? Buzzword. Modern writing? Oh man, I know the issues about that. An eye-catching thumbnail with popular book talk books and women's literature does not exist. Big statement. Maybe not 100% true, but it definitely caught my attention. The Second Story is the channel of Hilary Layne, an independent author. It looked like she had a channel built upon discussing the structure of writing itself. Some helpful how-tos and tutorials for writing conflict and creating interesting characters, but it seems like in the last few months she's been deep diving into more intellectual topics and specific aspects of storytelling. Heroes, villains, fantasy literature. It honestly seemed like something that might be up my alley. So once I had about 40 minutes to kill, I queued up the first video I found by her and pressed play. And, well, it's obvious by the thumbnail and title of my own video here that I don't agree with her on some of these topics, right? I mean, I wouldn't be here if I wasn't. The video itself isn't bad in comparison to other video essays I've seen in my life. She's a great public speaker and can organize her thoughts in a way that can make sense to the audience. It's clear she's had some formal education and has been actually spending most of her life writing, and it shows. Her editing is simple, but for a channel like hers, you don't need anything fancy. But where it begins to go awry for me is the content of the video itself. As I continued watching, I started to feel this little uneasy knot in my stomach, and it got bigger and bigger as the red watch time ran across my screen. See, her argument for the quote-unquote absolute degeneracy of modern writing isn't what I was expecting it to be. I was going into it expecting maybe a deep dive into book talk culture and how it feels like publishing companies are buying books for tropes, not their actual stories, and how to easily sell more things of poor quality for higher profit. And while she does make a few comments on that in her video, her topic is specifically framed around romantasy and romance books that seem to be trending in bookstores everywhere across the country right now. The ones with, well, she uses a lot of words in her video to call it, but I'm just gonna call it as it is, smut. I'm not gonna use a silly word like corn. I'm not. A lot of her issues come with the ones that contain smut in them, and of course, this topic has been discussed ad nauseum, and I feel silly myself adding to this conversation more because I don't really care about that kind of stuff. If people like it, that's fine by me. It's not something I actively go out and read myself. I just don't like it personally. If it's explicit in a book I'm reading, I usually just skim over the scenes to get to the actual juicy parts I like, you know, the plot. As I watched on in Layne's video though, I started to notice a lot more wrong with her argument. Not just in the facts that she was bringing up, but in the structure of her entire essay itself. She's a great writer and definitely keeps a thesaurus close to her when she's working on a video essay, but she's just, I don't want to say wrong, but she's not all correct either in the things she says to her audience of more than 100,000 people now. So I thought I'd take some time to break down her argument for both its content and structure and discuss the issues I see with it and where I think she goes wrong. This isn't meant to send hate her way. I'm trying to engage with a more academic and intellectual discussion, but given our differences in, well, not just presentation style, but basically politics, I don't expect I'll get the same back from her. Anyway, let's get started. Also, I swear I'm not riffing off Anthony Gramuglia's response to Layne's video on modern bad guys. I found her first, and I've been working on this script since before his stuff came out, I swear. This video is sponsored by me. Guess what? I have memberships now. Woo woo woo. There's still honestly a bit of a work in progress as I figure out how to YouTuber correctly, but if you're interested in showing me a little monetary support, go ahead. If not, I understand completely. Can't support monetarily, maybe support by giving me a I'd like to try to reach 4,000 by the end of the year now, and we're getting pretty close. It would mean a lot to me. Okay, on with the video. Trust me, this one's gonna be a doozy.
And now, our feature presentation.
We're going to break this down into some bigger chunks before diving a little deeper. So first, let's start with the crux of her main argument. Modern writing is bad because smut. That's a very basic summary though. We're going to unpack her video's arguments further, obviously, but if I had to summarize, most of her argument is centered around the idea that modern writing, especially literature for women, is bad now because it has explicit content in it. And for someone who says,
"This is not going to be a video about what I like or don't like to read. What I am offering you in this video is not my opinion or my reading preference, it is facts."
it sure does feel a lot like her own opinion, but who am I to call her out on that, huh? Modern writing for women is becoming degenerate, in her opinion, because of its association with explicit, smutty content and it being normalized. It's true that novels with explicit scenes have been on the rise in the last few years. People will go on to reference spice meters that are commonly found in book talk recommendations on both TikTok and Reddit and Twitter and everywhere. Some readers even refuse to read books that don't have any spice in them, keeping to their own pockets of the internet with poorly written books with smutty scenes in it. There's a lot of problems with this argument, namely the fact that non-spicy books are also being published still. Like, yes, these romantasy romance books are flooding bookstores, but that's just capitalism reacting to capitalism. It's supply and demand. Of course, there's going to be more copies of those books because more people want to read The Fourth Wing or A Court of Thorns and Roses than they do Moby Dick or Wuthering Heights. Demand is higher for romantasy than it is for classics or for regular fiction because people want to read that now. Do I like this personally? I'm not particularly myself, but unfortunately, as I don't rule the world yet, I can't change anything. But I guess I am kind of happy that people are reading, even if they're reading lower quality work. Layne continues to go on with her argument, bringing Sarah J. Maas up as an example. If you don't know, Sarah J. Maas is a writer of A Court of Thorns and Roses and The Throne of Glass YA series, both of which I have read, though never completed the first book or the whole series. As I started to find her writing quite juvenile as I got older, she explains the story shape that Maas uses in her own work. How Maas has stated in interviews that the smut is always quote-unquote plot relevant, and how she places those scenes right after a major incident in the story as a sort of release. Layne claims Maas ties the emotional release of the plot incident to the other kind of release in the smut scene to hook her female readers.
She stated that she often tries to make the significant sex scenes, such as that 2 or 3 day sex marathon, occur at the close of equally significant plot arcs. This is ideal for the female brain, which already seeks a story shape even in sexually explicit content.
I do actually enjoy this analysis of Maas's work. Even though I never finished ACOTAR, I couldn't get past the quality of the writing. It's cool to see it explained like that. I would love to see more, actually. I wonder if Layne has referenced the interview. It's not in the description. At least it's credited in the video a bit. We'll get back to that later. The next thing Layne goes on to break down are the ways that women's literature have categories like the hub. And she makes a comment about fanfic I gotta talk about really quickly. I swear, this is just gonna be a small little side quest.
Another interesting thing to note, if you're not yet sold on the fact that all of this so-called women's lit is little more than, 4-letter word starts with P, have a look at how much women's fiction has become subject to categorization norms that you don't see outside like the hub or fan fiction, which has become just another form of debauched adult entertainment. Sure, yeah, okay, fan fiction that isn't smut does theoretically exist, I guess, but that's like saying there are non-explicit OnlyFans creators.
Fan fiction that isn't smut does theoretically exist, she says? I could go on for hours about fan fiction, but the way that Layne believes and implies that all fanfic is just smut is incredibly inaccurate. And I can say this as I've been writing fanfics since I was 12, and none of it has ever been smut. Obviously, before I was 18, it wouldn't have been, but even now, it's never been. And I think I have a way to easily prove it. Let's log on to AO3 really quickly. This isn't the account I actually post on, so I'm safe here. Let's go to a random fandom. Loading. Let's go Marvel. Marvel's pretty big. All types. Should give us a pretty wide sample, and it's one of the more popular ones too, and wow, that's a lot of fanfic. You see, the thing I love most about AO3 is their filtering system. You can click on the box over here and you can see how many fics are tagged as what, and then click to show only those fics or to exclude those fics. So we can see here how many fics are tagged as explicit. Mature fics don't typically have smut in them in my experience. They tend to have other mature themes that aren't sexual in nature, so we'll leave them out for that. So there is roughly 132,000 explicit Marvel fics here on AO3 out of about 767,000. So let's do a little bit of math. And oh wow, would you look at that? Maybe 17% of Marvel fanfics on AO3 are explicit or have smut in them. That isn't smut does theoretically exist, my butt. The following main points of her argument are based on how women experience arousal and stuff and how it differs between the sexes, which I'm skipping over mostly because I have another point about that we'll talk about later. The next point Layne makes in her argument, though, is the accessibility of these books and how they impact people directly.
Several women and teenagers remarked that they wished they had never started reading erotic fiction when they were younger, as they believed it had destroyed their lives. The thing is, just as with people's taste in hardcore video subgenres, these tastes, these hungers, will intensify over time. I don't know how many videos and reviews I've seen by very young teenage girls who say the explicit sex in Sarah J. Maas's books is very mediocre and vanilla. That would be because they're already desensitized and crave harder content.
I don't doubt her own worries here. I do think there is a problem where, because we've made this stuff more accessible and popular, it could fall into the hands of unsuspecting minors, or maybe suspecting minors, I guess, and it could cause a lot of mental health issues, especially if they come across the books with the more darker topics. Dark romance books with themes around age gaps, abuse, etc., etc. I do think something needs to be done to protect kids, but I'm not calling for censorship. I'm literally just asking if these books can have like an 18+ sticker on them or something. I know stickers aren't fun, but if they can do it for movie and TV adaptations, they can put it on these books to disincentivize minors from being able to buy them. So I'll give her a small half point here for bringing up a real issue. And then again, she does state another fact.
Solid 90 to 95% of them started with erotic fiction, or smut, as they often called it, and fan fiction.
Which I would love to see where she got this fact from. Maybe this is the one in the description. Oh, no, it's not. Sadness, depression. The last major point I want to talk about with regards to her argument is based off this idea.
First of all, let's talk about empathy and the chemical reaction romance novels have on the female brain. There are so few studies that have been done on adult film's impact on women, and almost zero studies that have been done on erotic literature's impact on women. This is one of the most criminally understudied areas in human existence.
Yes, while I agree that anything regarding women's mental or physical health is understudied, I don't think there are very few studies. In fact, checking with just Google Scholar, there's a lot of studies done on the effects of explicit content on women's brains, teenage development, and more emerging about smut coming out now. Layne is wrong in saying that this is understudied. It feels like she didn't even take the time to do even a quick Google search for any sort of evidence. It seems like she just said it. The other half of this point here that Layne brings up is the effect that smut has on women. A lot of talk about women and female brains. Another thing I'm going to discuss later on. Essentially, she argues that since women are empathetic creatures and heightened empathy with female protagonists and situations with abusive male love interests will lead to empathetic arousal in the female reader.
A young, inexperienced woman will then be troubled trying to understand why she's feeling aroused by what is borderline abusive behavior. However, the story will continue in this vein until the man and woman are living happily ever after. The moment of joy at the end is the emotional climax that is essential for a woman to fully enjoy an erotic romance. And no, I'm not saying women are super weak or something like that, but I think we can all agree that strong emotions are exhausting no matter who you are, and women are more prone to feel emotions strongly.
What the hell?
Has this happened? I mean, I can't say a young person reading about an abusive relationship gave them the wrong idea of what a relationship should look like. I can't say for certain. I'm sure there are people out there who are unfortunately trapped in abusive relationships who aren't aware they are because the media they consume is mostly dark romance that features the situation they're in. But this argument that Layne is bringing up is very bioessentialist. According to the Cambridge Dictionary, and this is how you cite a source properly, Layne, bioessentialism is the belief that people's most important characteristics are controlled by biology and cannot change, particularly the belief that some groups of people are naturally less good than others because of this. So ideas such as men have to hold in their emotions to be masculine, and being emotional is too girly and shameful, and women should be subservient to men because they're physically weaker and too emotional to handle big leadership leadership roles, etc., etc. You know this. It's just basic sexism. Layne's main argument of the biology and psychology of smut on women's brains, aside from not even really giving us any sources to look at, feels very absolutist. Like every woman on the planet who reads smut will feel this way because that's how it's programmed into them. Like there's some kind of robotic AI who will respond to the arousal when they read certain words in a certain order on a page. Like, I am trying to take this argument seriously, but I just can't. I'm sorry.
An empathetic response to a romance book will result in an emotional roller coaster designed specifically to ensnare the tastes of women in such a way that their emotional involvement in a story will tend to be more intensive than a man's on average. Add to that the sexual infatuation triggered by the addictive erotic release of the extremely explicit scenes, which also takes a toll on the mind, whether you enjoy these scenes or not, especially if you do.
And while this can be true for some people, sure, the way that Layne presents it makes everything seem like this is just some sort of pre-written destiny for any woman or AFAB person who reads smut. She doesn't dive deeply into any sort of gender diverse experiences either. Trans and non-binary people are mysteriously left out of the conversation Layne attempts to make regarding this. And yet again, Layne references all of this evidence, talks about all the experience she's read other people having, and okay, alright, I think it's time to talk about the structure of her argument more, not just the substance of it. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to the substance of Layne's argument, but let's talk about the shape of this conservative critique cake too, because it's, in my opinion, very sloppy and messy and hidden under a thick fondant of academic aesthetics. I don't know why I've gone with so many cake metaphors recently. I'm not even that big of a fan of cake. Anyway, the first major thing I want to talk about with the architecture of her argument is her lack of sources. Now, of course, she does cite a few things. Notably, she has cited the Cosmopolitan article of Sarah J. Maas's interview that talks about the analysis I mentioned before, though it isn't explicitly named in the video or in the description. It's just Sarah J. Maas interview Cosmopolitan and the date the article was published. I will give her credit for at least citing this, but leaving out the title of the article is really unprofessional at the very least. Like, yes, it's a long title, but people have had long titles referenced before in videos, and it's just a simple resizing of the text. It might end up looking too small on a phone, but at the very least, it's there. I would also like to point out on this little snippet Layne pulls from this article is one paragraph in a larger interview. While I think the analysis is fine by me, Layne specifically highlights two sentences I want to pick up on. I don't throw the sex in just to have it in there, and I tried to make the sex tied to the plot and the characters.
She stated that she often tries to make the significant sex scenes, such as that 2 or 3 day sex marathon, occur at the close of equally significant plot arcs.
It feels like Layne went out of her way to highlight the least charitable things that Maas says in this interview. I mean, even just a sentence down, Maas talks about how the 3-day fun time marathon wasn't just written for fun, but for catharsis and healing for both characters. The rest of the article also talks about how Maas deliberately wrote one character to be a brooding alpha male for her female to fall for, only to subvert it, and how she doesn't like slut-shaming and has a positive outlook on sex, especially for female characters, and how, well, I'll trust you to read the article itself too. It's actually a nice little interview. What I'm trying to point out here with Layne is that her highlighted quote from this article is very cherry-picked to make Maas seem like some maybe sex-addicted freak almost, and not someone who is passionate about the things they write in a style that some people just don't vibe, and how her citation was unprofessional and improperly done in my opinion. The second thing that's important to point out is the way that Layne backs her argument with facts.
This is not going to be a video about what I like or don't like to read. What I am offering you in this video is not my opinion or my reading preference, it is facts.
Multiple times throughout this video, Layne goes on to reference and discuss these facts and the evidence she's learned through various studies. She's trying to portray herself as an academic and an intellectual, yet she doesn't actually name any of these studies that she's claiming to get her information from. There is one study she does cite in this video, and it is just about what hyperempathy does to a person.
Heightened states of empathy have been found to contribute to pain, depression, anxiety, emotional overinvolvement, burnout, vicarious trauma, and post-traumatic stress disorder.
Like, if studies have been done on topics like this, if you were a radio essayist, who am I, Scooby-Doo? Like, if studies have been done on topics like this, if you were a real video essayist, or hey, just an essayist in general, wouldn't you think your audience would want to know more too, to find out where you got your information and to share this knowledge, and also to properly cite sources as you're supposed to do in academia? Layne keeps her references to these studies purposefully vague. Why? If H-Bomber Guy's video essay 2 years ago on plagiarism has taught us anything, there's a modicum of reasons, and I don't want to come out and accuse Layne of not doing research for her videos and just reciting her own opinion as fact, but then she says things like this. Where are these numbers coming from?
Solid 90 to 95% of them started with erotic fiction, or smut, as they often called it, and fan fiction.
Stating a numerical fact but refusing to cite the source for that fact is at least very suspicious in my opinion. She's obscuring the sources she might have read, maybe in an effort to hide any sort of specific political bias they might have so her video can reach a wider audience. That last bit is conspiracy theory and just me speculating. Don't take that as fact. See, that's how you state what is fact and what is opinion in your video. You say it. Around the same point in this video, Layne also goes on to discuss how she spent time talking to women and reading accounts from other women on how reading smut affected them mentally.
I spent a little time while I was researching this subject talking to women and reading the accounts of women who were struggling with the addiction to hardcore content.
Now listen, I'm not saying that she should dox the people she talked to or show their names and faces, as this can be a sensitive topic to some people. If these women are struggling with addiction because of this kind of material, I don't blame Layne for hiding their faces and keeping them anonymous. However, I feel like the lack of anything visual for this makes it hard to believe that she actually did this. And there are multiple ways this could have been done. Redacted messages and emails, fake names to protect anonymity. Just saying that you talked quote unquote to some women without showing anything for it makes it feel like, to me at the least, that she read a few posts online and called it a day.
I read an account from one woman who noted that she preferred written smut because within books and fan fiction she was able to find things that would have been illegal in video form. So that's nice.
And if she read this account specifically somewhere public, could she cite the source? She didn't seem to have an issue with putting the romance and romantasy subreddit on blast earlier in this video by showing poorly redacted screenshots. If this was a blog post or an article and it's public, it would have been fine to be cited as evidence. If it was just like a comment on something, maybe a redaction would be necessary, but the point stands on how it's phrased. The argument is also stupid too, but I'm trying to focus on the structure right now. Near the end of her video, Layne even states that she's read some of these works herself to understand the vibe of the romantasy/romance genre for her own research. Her monologue of the effect of these books, I think, says enough about what she feels.
And something that really surprised me was how huge of an emotional impact they had on me. Despite the fact that I didn't care about these characters, and despite the fact that they were all mostly happy endings and everything else, I was legitimately depressed during the few weeks when I was reading these books. I was having trouble focusing on my work, I was having trouble sleeping, I was even having trouble eating, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong until it dawned on me that my mind was basically being ripped around a female-specific roller coaster that was designed to trigger the most extreme emotional and chemical reaction in my mind, short of actually doing drugs.
I'm sorry, I just have to do a side tangent. Did she just compare reading The Fourth Wing to doing drugs? Okay. Let's take a second to breathe. That part was probably just hyperbole, but maybe she did get a strong reaction from these books. I'm sure she's read something on the heavier end then. Surely she'll name what books she's read and give us a little bit of nothing. She gives us nothing on what books she read. You have about 6 seconds to catch a list of 7 book covers that flash on screen, from The Knight and the Moth to Fourth Wing to even Outlander. Yes, that Outlander, the series that was published in the 90s. But still, you have 6 seconds to try to see what book she is referring to in this video. 6 seconds to catch it. I have the list of books she read here because I paused and went frame by frame to figure out which books she's claimed to have read for this video. And while again, I don't want to accuse her of not reading these books, the lack of any textual support makes me very suspicious of her claims of actually reading them. Like, realistically, if she read these books, I would expect her to have mentioned certain scenes that made her uncomfortable. Maybe not described in detail, but something with a bit of weight to it the same. The Fourth Wing has, from my knowledge, only 2 or 3 major smut scenes wrapped up in its rather lower quality writing, but no textual evidence is brought up in her argument is what I'm saying, so it's making me very doubtful of everything she says now. This comes back to the biggest issue with the structure of Layne's argument, her tone. She speaks with absolute confidence, using vocabulary that mimics academia, helping to create an illusion of intellectualism, but doesn't really show the evidence. Very few links and papers, no actual studies cited in her video except one on what hyper-empathy can do to a person in an article of an interview with Sarah J. Maas from 2017. It's very, dare I say, conservative strategy. She states these things as facts, when in reality it just is mostly appeals to morality and opinions buried under layers of faux academia. I'd like to make an addendum here at the end, because some might point out in her video she cites plenty of things on screen, therefore there should be no issue. And it's true. Something I missed while drafting my original script were some sources she cites on screen for us. Layne does flash up a lot of articles and blog posts and uses footage from interviews with Sarah J. Maas and other writers, especially closer to the end of her video, but it's important to point out these things she really shows on screen, very few of them are actually scientific or academic research papers. 90% of them are blog posts made by people who like the romantasy genre, and she's showing them to her audience like a gotcha card, almost to say, look at these degenerates enjoying this stuff. And yes, not all of them are that. She uses these fun graphs from somewhere, I don't know where, about the gender statistics of writers, editors, and literary agents. She states that these are from roughly 2019 because the more recent ones are paywalled, but
I definitely see the point, but I was curious if that was true, so I, took to the internet. The percentage of female authors as of 2019, which was the most recent number I could find, any further statistics were likely behind this mother of all paygates, was 50.
Again, where is this information from? They all seem to be cut off weird. She's not sure the actual source of these places. And then she goes on to use Wikipedia as a source. And I don't have an issue with people using Wikipedia for a source. The rules the editors have to follow now are a lot stricter than the anarchy they used to be at the dawn of the internet. And it's a great place to start diving deep into a topic or look for surface level information. I'll admit I use Wikipedia when I talk about films to figure out the production process, and then I use the references to go deeper. It's a great diving board into a broader topic, essentially. And Layne uses it fine, as a reference for the New York Times bestseller list from the last few decades. But something about the way she says that how romantasy dominates huge blocks of the yearly calendar for the bestseller list is ignoring two things. One, that other months exist. Thankfully, there doesn't seem to be any information on her screenshots that are missing. Two, that the bestseller list is once again more of a reflection of supply and demand than quality. Just because a book is a New York Times bestseller does not mean it's good. Not to mention, the list itself has its own list of controversies. The New York Times bestseller list is easy to artificially inflate, the sales of a book to appear more successful than it actually is. Books can accidentally be double counted by including whole sales, and so much more. I mean, do I need to bring up the best book ever, I Libertine? So using the New York Times bestseller list as proof these books are flooding the market and being read, not that good of an argument, really. It appears that Layne doesn't have any issue citing these sources, at least in her video, even though her description is empty. But the point still stands. If she can cite these, why can't the same be said about the studies she talks about earlier in the video about empathy and how women experience pleasure and whatever? Weird, right? I feel like this is the part of the video where I feel like I've gone a little cray-cray. I went into this video expecting it to just be another response, like my Modern Girlsies response video about Disney female characters. Something fun and light to rip off of, something that would end up as just an intellectual discussion on something asinine. And maybe the topic should have clued me into this a bit, but what I found with Layne's argument, in not just this video essay, but the others she's released before and since, is a classic anti-intellectual conservative grip packed up in a pretty little bow for everyone to find. She's not a grifter like we're used to seeing on YouTube, but she's a little clone of highbrow grifters like Jordan Peterson or Ben Shapiro when he tries. She's a facsimile of their ilk that disguises her puritanical Catholic beliefs with rationality. Of course she likes the fiction of the old days, the fiction from before the smut invasion, obviously. Her constant tracking back to the before times in literary fiction and publishing isn't possibly a dog whistle to her conservative beliefs or anything. She's just doing this because she's concerned about how it impacts women and their mental and physical health. She'll tell you that she's read accounts and studies of this happening, and you have to trust her because her language is highbrow enough, her stances are confident enough that it slips by you that she cites very little sources in this 37-minute video. People are listening to her, believing they found someone rational enough to call out the publishers using sex to sell more books, not thinking about the subtext of her arguments. You'll see her top comments are all full of the same sentiments, thanking her for taking the time to research this and breaking it down for people to understand, sharing it in a digestible format, and how they or someone they know had difficulties with the content of these books and how it started impacting them negatively. And again, I don't doubt that their experiences are real and valid. Too much of anything can have a negative effect on our tiny little worm brains. They're not noticing the holes and issues with her argument as a whole. There's a really interesting section at the end of her video that makes a very fascinating statement on shame.
Shame is not a bad thing. Shame is how our brains tell us we're doing something that will harm us. If we feel shame eating that fourth slice of triple chocolate cake in one sitting, that's our brain telling us that this is bad for our health. If we feel shame because we haven't exercised in over 6 months, that's our brain telling us that we need physical exercise of some kind. If we feel shame when we take in hardcore explicit material, that's our brain telling us that this is going to harm us in some way and we need to stop. This is our brain trying to save us.
And it feels like she's using shame and guilt associated with shame in a very conservative Catholic way, because she has associated reading these books and this content with sinning, even if she doesn't state it outright in her video, and she's twisting the definitions to meet her preconceived bias. She didn't go into this video like most people do, where they discuss the issues that smut can have on people in an empathetic way. Most of her argument has the moral undertone of shaming women who do enjoy it as filthy, disgusting degenerates, playing dramatic music with screenshots of out-of-context Reddit posts, articles, and even stickers to subtly imply disgust, because she's better than them. Thankfully, I'm not alone in these word critiques of her work. Anthony Gramuglia here on YouTube has an amazing breakdown of her Modern Villains Are Pitiful and Impotent video that I'm going to link below. See, I did bring him up in the beginning for a reason. Dissects her beliefs on what evil is. In this video, Anthony goes on to explore how the sources that Layne uses and cites are like that of, St. Thomas Aquinas, the Catholic philosopher from the 1200s, as the best source for evil. Never mind that it completely ignores Eastern perspectives on good and evil that have long existed before and after Aquinas, or modern Western beliefs that have evolved to today.
This is in addition to many of the points I've already made thus far. The theory was later formalized by Thomas Aquinas. Layne cites Thomas Aquinas as a primary source for her definition of evil, and that makes sense. Aquinas was a friar whose writing on Catholic philosophy significantly shaped modern perspectives of Western society. He combined the teachings of Aristotle with the teachings of the Vatican. However, many people have criticized Aquinas for coming up with conclusions, then trying to justify them afterwards.
It's important to point out that this isn't a one-off in her videos either. In previous videos and current ones, her arguments are built upon very conservative, right-wing religious ideas about the world, how to define good and evil, the prevalence of smut in women's literature. I'm sure there's more, but I don't have the energy to break down every single one of her videos to look for her hidden agenda, or whatever you'd like to call it. But I can make one point. In one of her more recent uploads, How Modern Schools Make Terrible Writers Deliberately, she discusses how she never spent a lot of time in public school because she was either homeschooled by her father or went to a private school later in life. On her website, she even talks about how she traveled a great deal of our beautiful nation already and then spent time familiarizing herself in Europe and specifically Germany. We're going to ignore that for now. And she never actually went to college. She opted to travel and teach herself, which is a very privileged thing in modern society. I couldn't just decide after high school to go spend my time traveling Europe. I had to settle for the cheapest college in my state to get my degree. And some people aren't even as lucky as I am to be even able to go to college. And there's nothing wrong with what Layne did. I'm happy and admittedly a little jealous that she got to travel Europe through her college years. Good for her. But I can't help it but point it out either. I think Layne here is either deliberately or maybe accidentally obscuring her experiences to sound more relatable to other people and trying to ignite the kindling and add more flames to the already burning fire of the moral panic we've got over our storytelling right now. And I think that's something worth discussing here. And she's not alone in this argument either. This conservative moral panic cycles itself through as the degeneracy of the decade. Back in the 1930s when comics were first being introduced, people began to believe comics would corrupt the youth. Educators, church and civic groups, and even parents began to protest and object to comics like Batman and Superman, including the Catholic Church's National Office of Decent Literature, as things that would cause delinquency in the youth. Famous for this is Dr. Frederick Wertham, a psychiatrist who went ham on this idea. He's the writer of The Seduction of the Innocent, a book published in the 50s that claimed that comic books were harmful to young minds. You see, they're violent, and kids will become more violent as a result, an argument we haven't heard before. Comics had 2 sexual scenes for children. They claimed that Batman and Robin were gay partners, and that Wonder Woman's bondage subtext makes her a lesbian. So great stuff. This moral panic led to the Comics Code Authority, who would eventually regulate the content published in comics to make it appropriate. Of course, this was a voluntary thing. It was meant to be an alternative idea to the government regulating what is published in comics. But this way, with this little fun stamp on the comics, you knew that you could buy little Timmy the newest copy of Superman and he wouldn't be exposed to any inappropriate ideas. By the early 2000s and early 2010s, it has since been defunct, but it still exists as one of the earliest examples around moral panics around media. But it's not the only one. We of course had the Satanic Panic of the 80s and 90s, where amongst many other things, BADD was formed. BADD, otherwise known as Bothered About Dungeons and Dragons, very creative name, was a group that formed around the idea that Dungeons and Dragons was linked to, among many things, higher rates of teen suicide, drug use, and Satanism. It was founded by Patricia A. Pulling with help from Thomas Radecki, who later went on to found the National Coalition of Television Violence, believing that violence on TV affects teenagers, and he was later accused of sexual violence against his patients and trading opioids for sex. So, you know, great person to be working with. And while none of the accusations from Pulling or Radecki held up in courts or analysis, it was still a huge conspiracy theory at the time that if your kid played D&D, it was only a matter of time before your little Timmy was now participating in satanic rituals. And now we're in the modern era where another cycle of this degeneracy has formed. Books and fan fiction, particularly those written by female authors, are among the many pieces of media in the bullseye for being woke. Yes, it all comes full circle with anti-woke ideology, unfortunately. Layne, at least, differs from those who might be her contemporaries complaining about gay people in Disney films with her pseudo-intellectual analysis and moralizing about smut in written works. She frames her arguments not around the anti-woke ideology, but the same conservative view as those who do. She complains about the fall of literature, about the cursed cultural crusade of postmodernism, about the way that smut impacts young teenage girls' brains. She frames her argument that women are being taken advantage of by books in the publishing industry and forced to develop addictions to smut to buy more smut for money. She's not acknowledging any of the following, like sexually explicit material has existed for thousands of years. Sex is intrinsically linked to our relationships heavily, both physically and emotionally. Erotic content can have strong themes in it more than just the climax. It can make statements about power, position, authority, and more. That women are not just publishing all smut. Plenty of books have come out by female writers that don't have any smut in them, especially in this YA romantasy space. And that some darker romances might not be written to titillate the reader and writer, but may be written as an expression or to explore traumas that the writer and readers want to deal with. There's so many angles that Layne could have taken this video, but the one she chose shows exactly what she thinks of the world she lives in. That this writing is corrupting poor, innocent young women, and that the writing of the old days is what we need to get back to. Mirroring the idea that the world we live in sucks now, and we need to go back to the 50s when everything still made sense. Just ignore the issues of the 50s and we'll be okay. She's buried her real argument under layers of intellectualism and studies, cites very little of her research for you to look back on because it'll be obvious what she's actually trying to do. She's trying to make everyone see her way is the right way, the old ways are the right way, and anything modern, anything queer, anything sexual, anything that doesn't fall under Christian values is bad and it needs to go. Mic drop. God, this video makes me so angry. And of course, in the middle of me writing and editing this video is when 2 other videos about the second story, Hilary Layne, and her video on the modern degeneration of writing, or whatever she's calling it. 2 videos commenting on this have since come out. One of them by Mickey Atkins, who does a lot of therapy talk. I've never seen her channel before, but I did just subscribe to her, so I'll learn more about her. And the other one is by another slightly smaller creator called Ophie Dokie. I have both of their videos linked below discussing this topic because I think the second story, Hilary Layne, whatever you want to call her, I think we need to talk a lot more about her general moral arguments and her rhetoric too. So go check them out, link in the description. Again, I started this response video innocently. I thought it'd be just a simple thing. See some of her claims, refute them, and move on with my life. I don't think Layne is a grifter in the way other people are, but she's still kind of subtly grifting people in a way that's buried under layers upon layers of pseudo-intellectual nonsense. She barely cites sources for her claims, says things are objectively true facts, but when she refuses to cite those facts, it feels more like she's just using that as a veil for her own opinions. And when she cites the opinions she's read online with no visual evidence, it's just even more obvious that she's trying to subtly change her audience and grift them into her own beliefs. And I just can't stand for that. Mostly for the citing of sources. Like, did we not spend a good time almost 2 years ago talking about what it means to not cite things properly? Anytime someone comes out against postmodernism, that knot in my stomach comes back. Because in my opinion, it feels like anything anti-postmodern is just the intellectual smart people phrase for anything anti-woke. Layne can say modern writing is degenerate now, but I disagree. I think modern writing is democratizing. With the advent of smaller publishing houses and self-publishing, many writers who have never been able to get a chance to share their work before are now able to. Marginalized voices, women, people of color, queer people, can now share their work the way everyone else can, which is what we should be celebrating, not condemning. And of course, the accessibility of publishing opening up means that a lot more slop will get published, and that's just an effect of it all. Though, notably, don't you think bad stuff has been written before? When we talk about the classics, it's not just those books were the only ones published at the time. We remember the classics because they were the best published at the time. I'm sure Layne isn't going to find or watch this video, and I don't really care if she does. I care a bit more about her audience finding this video to show them that she's not, like, perfect. Granted, no one is perfect, but the way that Layne shows little sources for her arguments, especially in this video, should be at least the main takeaway of my response, because that's not something we should ignore. It's something that might be being done purposefully, and that's not how you win an argument as an intellectual. It's how you hide your agenda. I think this goes on for the longest video I've ever made on my channel. And again, this started as just like a simple little, oh, I'm gonna check out this silly video and give you my thoughts, and it's spiraled since. Well, I hope you guys liked this video. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I will catch you all in the next one. Have a great day wherever you are, and as always, remember to keep your heads in the clouds.